Amigas aren't used for MIDI music. That was the job of its competitor, the Atari ST, surely. Or was it? Grab yourselves a cuppa and join me and Amiga friends of the cave as we try to break the Amiga MIDI myth. Hello cave dwellers. Yes, we've decided to try and incorporate a little more MIDI into our Amiga worlds to see if it can enrich the experience or if that's better left off to other machines. The great competitor to the Amiga in Europe was of course the Atari ST, which despite having a less capable audio chipset than the Amiga, had built-in MIDI ports. And that established the machine as a music studio workhorse, taking charge of racks of external audio devices and conducting them straight out of the box.
Okay, these are MIDI instruments. We're using a MIDI cable out of the back of the Atari ST, which is the MIDI port is built in, and we're using a Casio CZ101, a tone generator from Yamaha called a TX7. We've got a Latin percussion drum machine and a regular trap set drum machine. These are all MIDI instruments, and the notes will tell the MIDI instruments what to play as the music is being scrolled by.
The Amiga lacked such ports, and, as history has taught us, developers are reluctant to write software to support non-standard hardware, as the market for the business is significantly reduced. These factors resulted in the Amiga being touted as an excellent machine for tracker music, digitised sampling, and games with thumping soundtracks, but less recognised in MIDI arenas. So to kick us off, Maddie from the channel Ms. Mad Lemon is going to show us how she's added MIDI interfaces to her Amiga and have some fun trying to incorporate it into tracker music making. Let's see how she gets on.
Hola cave dwellers! Now today I'm going to talk a little bit about MIDI and the Amiga. Okay, so here I have two MIDI devices for the Commodore Amiga, and they're both MIDI interfaces really, and just to connect MIDI to the serial port, and you can see over here the same thing. This one's built like a freaking tank though. Now this one, which I am opening up at the moment, is the MIDI Master, and this one I remember seeing in the Amiga format magazines, that the really early ones, I'm talking about like, 88 or something like this. So I think it's probably the first one, if not one of the first ones. Now as you can see here, it's not complicated at all. You have the serial port coming in, the circuitry, and then it goes to, what is it? It goes to MIDI in here, MIDI through, and 3 MIDI outs. So this is actually the more complicated ones that they get. Now this one here looks a bit more complicated, but it's actually not. It's just more condensed, and it's got the same amount of components more or less. Now this is the April 1992 issue of CU Amiga, and I decided to get this one because I remember it being a lot about music. And I actually remember this game Parasail Stars. I used to be crazy about it then, and the music on it, also the boss music. Now here is an entire article about the Amiga and MIDI. So it's like, even back then, people made a lot of music on the Amiga using MIDI interfaces and programs such as MusicX and Bars and Pipes and things like this. Now what I'm going to do here is simply connect my gorgeous Yamaha Refest DX to my Amiga's MIDI interface. Now simply put, MIDI is just a way for the Amiga to talk to whatever MIDI device there is there, whether it's a keyboard or another device. Okay, so for my MIDI demonstration I've decided to use Octamed version 4 because it's the one which I can freaking understand. Octamed 5, it completely changed. Normally I'm not an Octamed user at all. I use Soundtracker Pro 2, but that supports MIDI in but not MIDI out. Okay, so we have a situation here where we have a tracker program here, Octamed 4, and we have it connected via MIDI in and out to my Yamaha keyboard. So let's record something, and I will show you exactly how this thing can work. Let's input and out, send out, no. So we've kind of recorded a little piece of music on here. I was I was getting the Yamaha to send to the Amiga the information about the notes, what octave it is, what notes I'm pressing, and so forth. Now, when you play it back, into the keyboard, it's doing the opposite way around. The Amiga is telling the keyboard what notes to play, you know, so forth. And that's how MIDI works. Now let's add something here. I don't know what that yellow block was, but never mind. So. And you kind of slowly build up on that, and then you do the bass, you know, so forth. So that's basically it. It's in a nutshell. That's how you would with the tracker program. This is. I mean, with a sequencer, I think it might be more suited, like Music X or something like that. It'd be more suited to MIDI, but it's possible with even a tracker program like this, which is what the Amiga standard Amiga mod uses. So. Let me show you something actually. On that note, I will get a normal Amiga mod. You remember that game which I was telling you about earlier on, which we saw in the magazine, Parasail Stars? Well, the bus music, which is here. Yes! I like this one. Okay, so the bus music, which we just heard, is. So I'm basically using this as an example because it's like a short and sweet, simple tune, and you know it's simple in construction as well, so it's good to give an example with, and it's a nice tune. Now what we're gonna do now is just to see how it sounds. Let's get a mod like this, and this uses synthesized sounds. Actually, Amiga can do synthesized sounds just like the Commodore 64 and you know others, but it's limited. It's not as advanced as a SID chip. You know, it's basic synthesis, basic wavetable synthesis. We now connect the keyboard directly to your ears and we play this thing. So we have another example here. This is a mod from a demo, or more like a music disc stroke demo, and it's called Chinese Stream, and it's one which I really like. You may recognize it. It's like old school. What I'm going to do now is configure this, like assign some of the instruments to MIDI out, so that some of the instruments are played by my keyboard. And MIDI, and I wish to thank Retro Man Cave for, you know, including me in his amazing video, because this is kind of, you know, I love this kind of thing, so I'm so, you know, I'm thrilled to be a part of it. So thanks so much, Retro Man Cave, and Cave Dwellers, I wish you a good day.
Well, I'd say that was pretty successful. Our first tick in the box for the Amiga and MIDI, and it looked like Maddie had a lot of fun there. If you're not already doing so, then pop over to her channel and subscribe. You'll find a link in the description of this video. From the world of trackers to sequencers then. To take full advantage of a studio filled with MIDI-capable instruments, sequencer software should be used. Amiga sequencer software included Bars and Pipes and Music X amongst others. To give us a flavour of how these ran on the Amiga, we're taking a trip into Amiga Ireland's cave to see how he uses them. So, how do we get the best experience out of MIDI music making on the Amiga?
While trackers let you get the most from the 4 sound channels of the Amiga, Music X takes it to the next level by making it simple to use both MIDI and the internal sound system. It won't let you do all of the tricks a tracker can do with the internal sound, but with a keyboard and MIDI interface, you'll have everything you need to make the music you want with Music X. This is a MIDI interface, and you'll need one to use Music X to its full potential. It takes input from my musical keyboard. The output goes to any MIDI sound bank you'd like. The interfaces are easy to use, but give a huge amount of control. The interfaces include the librarian, the sample manager, filters, key mapping, and the sequencer. The sequencer is where you'll do most of your work, but also in the editor, which we'll see later. To record, simply press the record button to begin. I'm going to record a piano track. Here you're going to see MIDI and the Amiga's internal sounds used simultaneously. The internal sound channels will provide the metronome. After recording, just store it and give it a name. After you've recorded all of your tracks, you might want to tweak one or two. Here's an example of editing the bass. I can zoom in and modify the notes or create new ones or remove them. I can lengthen this note too. Have a listen. See, a long one. And if I shorten it, a nice short note. The main sequence here allows us to arrange all of the sequences within it. I've called it main, and you can see here I've added all of the tracks. I've also added some tempo changes. There are a few stray notes being played here. I've ruled everything out, but it looks like there's an issue with the MIDI interface, so some notes are getting routed to the wrong instruments. But the software works well. Thanks for watching.
Thank you to Amiga Ireland for that tour, and as with everyone else on this video, do take a moment to visit their channels, subscribe and check out their content. And Amiga Ireland also produce a great Amiga news podcast which you should definitely check out. Remaining on the sequencer theme, how about we go through the keyhole to the studio of Christian Simpson. He has an interesting history with the Amiga and a lovely example of his work to share with us. Let's take a look.
Hi guys, welcome to my retro setup. My name is Christian Simpson and I used to work for a company called the Blue Ribbon Soundworks. They were based in Atlanta, Georgia, and they produced music software for the Amiga and other computers, including Super Jam, which you see here, and Bars and Pipes Professional. So I'm running Super Jam on my Commodore Amiga 500 Plus, and I'm going to give you a quick little demo of some of the music. So this is a song that I wrote. It's called Being Me, and it's actually coming out on my album Instrumental, which is going to be a collection of 80s to 2000s songs and instrumentals that I produced, a lot of them on the Amiga. This is actually going to be playing through a Korg wave station with a little help from Korg Legacy, which is a kind of Korg synth emulation package that Korg released for the Mac and other systems. So with that all wired up, running along these cables, let's give this a go. And if you like what you hear, if you check out my music writing website, it's chrisjsimpson.com, you can download the tracks. All right, here we go.
Some great sounding music then from Christian, and a great coming together of old and new technologies to create it. So far we've covered music creation on both trackers and sequencers successfully. But what about games? Surely the Amiga doesn't support any kind of MIDI in its games. Well, you might be pleasantly surprised. DOS and Windows PCs in the 80s and 90s had the luxury of a games catalogue that supported MIDI audio devices, and one device in particular called the Roland MT32. A great sounding device for those who could afford the $700 price tag. The Amiga 2 had games which natively supported the MT32 during its commercial lifetime, and more recently, a wider library of games has opened up which we can take advantage of. So I'll be taking a look at Amiga gaming and MIDI with the help of Modern Vintage Gamer, who'll be joining us shortly. Unlike Maddie, I'm not using an original Amiga MIDI interface, I'm using the Rastport KA12, a modern cable that's available to buy today with the interface contained within the serial port of the DB25 plug. I'm also using a more up-to-date external MIDI device than the MT32. This is a Roland Sound Canvas SC55, or you can use an SC88. These devices can be set to run in an MT32 compatible mode. Let me explain. The MT32 is a pre-MIDI device. That is to say, its instrument table is not the same as the agreed MIDI standard, even though it's accessed over a MIDI interface. It also allows custom patches, so sound effects or other instruments can be added on a per-game basis in a genuine MT32. And what is it that we can experience in terms of games? Well, here's the IBM PC's list of MT32 compatible games, and it's a pretty extensive list. Some really great titles in there, ranging from flight sims to adventure and strategy games. In contrast then, a quite laughable list for the Atari ST. Just 12 games, look at that. Admittedly, there's a couple that I'd really enjoy playing, like Operation Stealth and Cruise for a Corpse, but come on, 12 games? That's ridiculous. Let's see what the Amiga's got to offer. Half again, just 6 games on the Amiga that support MIDI. They're all from the same software house, Sierra, and they all run on the same game engine. Well, I mean, I'm impressed that some actually exist, but of course disappointed that there's only 6. Nevertheless, let's give them a try and see if the difference is worth the effort. As all of these games run on the same engine, configuring them to use the MT32 is achieved in exactly the same way. You simply run the install program and change the sound driver from the Amiga sound to the MT32 sound driver. So let's hear the difference on some of those games between the Amiga sound driver, the MT32 with my hardware, and a genuine MT32 device thanks to YouTuber I Am Ironclaw. Let's have a listen. So what did you think? To my ear, my hardware is no substitute for a real MT32, where you appear to get the best combination of music and, through custom patches, the actual sound effects. Larry's Toilet Chorus, for example, was substituted for a symphony of trombones, whereas on the MT32, we got something that reached a little deeper. Let's see a few more examples on the genuine MT32. Not bad at all. I Am Ironclaw has also discovered on his channel a few additional games that support the MT32 on the Amiga, so that Wikipedia page is perhaps not complete. Luckily, I also know another man with an MT32, and I asked him, where do we go next? Can we take MIDI music in Amiga games to the next level? Let's see what he says.
So how do we take Amiga gaming to the next step with MIDI? After we've played the 5 or so Sierra games, the next thing that we can look at is something like ScumVM, which is the LucasArts interpreter or emulator that plays the classic LucasArts games like Monkey Island, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, Day of the Tentacle, Sam and Max Hit the Road, etc., etc. Not only is it a great emulator that runs on the Amiga, it also supports MIDI via MT32. So if you have the appropriate MIDI hardware, you can run ScumVM with awesome MIDI sounds coming out of your speakers. Let's check out a couple of examples of that. Now, ScumVM on the Amiga has excellent MIDI support, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Now, if you are wanting to use ScumVM, you will need a fairly fast Amiga. I would recommend an 030 or faster. This is running an Amiga 1200 with an 060 accelerator, and as you can see, it loaded pretty quick there. Now, one thing I will say is that ScumVM has MIDI support for not all of the games. Now, some of the games didn't actually support MIDI. Some of the later LucasArts games, for example, Full Throttle and The Dig, they were CD-ROM based games and only streamed music off the CD, so they didn't have any Roland MT32 or any other general MIDI support built into the game. But the other games on this list do support MIDI, and many of the other LucasArts games do support MIDI as well. Now, the way to set up MIDI on ScumVM for the Amiga is if you go to your options menu. Now, of course, I'm assuming that you have your MT32 all set up, configured, and ready to go. If you go to your MIDI tab here and you select your general MIDI device, select CAMD, which is the Commodore Amiga MIDI device, and that's the library that supports MIDI for the ScumVM interpreter or the emulator. And now we have the ability to run MIDI on any of these games, except for the ones that I mentioned previously. So let's check out a couple of games and take a listen and hear what they sound like.
Thanks, Modern Vintage Gamer. As you can see, he's got a great setup and his channel is full of awesome content, especially Amiga related. So what can we conclude from our experiments today? The Amiga is, unsurprisingly given the low overhead created by MIDI, a perfectly capable MIDI machine. More surprisingly, there is a host of great support for the interface built right into some of our favourite programs, such as Octamed as Maddie showed us. And we've only scratched the surface of some of the great sequencer packages out there. Games, well, yes, we've proven they work, but native Amiga games are a rarity, and proof of concept almost to prove that it was possible. Indeed it was, and we can squeeze a little more fun out of that thanks to ScumVM. As Christian showed us, thanks to MIDI being the de facto standard in instruments even today, there's no reason why you can't go ahead and use your Amiga to make your next hit record with modern instruments. However, most importantly, we all had a lot of fun trying a side of the Amiga we don't often get to explore. I hope you enjoyed being in the cave with all of us today. If you did, be sure to subscribe to my channel, as well as our guests, using the links in the description. Give us a thumbs up, and check out my Patreon page to support new content. Thanks for watching. Take care.